Moving to a new home during the holiday season is like trying to unwrap a gift while wearing mittens. Everything feels unfamiliar, clumsy, and slightly overwhelming. For the Wales family, their first Christmas in their new house wasn't just about finding where they packed the ornaments, or figuring out which wall deserved the tree. It was about discovering that sometimes the most imperfect moments create the most perfect memories. When Sarah Wales first walked through the empty rooms of their new house in late November, she never imagined that within 3 weeks these bare walls would witness laughter that echoed through halls not yet filled with furniture. Tears of joy over disasters turned into family legends, and a Christmas morning that would redefine what home truly means. This isn't a story about picture-perfect holidays or magazine-worthy decorations. This is about a real family learning that home isn't found in the boxes you unpack, but in the moments you create while unpacking them together. The morning Sarah Wales received the keys to their new house, she stood in the empty living room and tried to imagine Christmas morning in 3 weeks. The hardwood floors echoed her footsteps, and winter sunlight streamed through windows that had never seen their family's laughter. Her husband, Mark, appeared beside her, carrying their 2-year-old daughter Emma on his shoulders, while 8-year-old Jake explored the empty rooms with the enthusiasm only children possess when faced with new adventures. "Mom, can we have the Christmas tree right here?" Jake pointed to the large bay window overlooking their new neighborhood. Sarah smiled, remembering how their old apartment barely had room for a small tabletop tree. This house, with its 3 bedrooms and actual dining room, felt like stepping into someone else's life. The Wales family had been saving for this moment for 5 years. Mark worked double shifts at the automotive plant while Sarah balanced her part-time nursing job with raising the children. Every dollar was carefully planned. Every expense weighed against their dream of giving their kids a real home with a backyard and space to grow. When the bank finally approved their loan application in October, they knew they'd be moving during the busiest time of the year, but the opportunity couldn't wait.
Their first challenge arrived before they even finished unpacking.
The previous owners had left the house in November, and apparently, so had the heating system's cooperation. On their second night in the new house, Mark discovered that the furnace was making concerning noises and producing more sound than warmth. With temperatures dropping and Emma developing a persistent cough, Sarah found herself questioning whether they'd made the right decision.
"Maybe we moved too fast," she confided to her sister during a late-night phone call, while Mark attempted to coax warmth from their temperamental heating system.
"The kids are sleeping in our bed because their rooms are freezing, we're eating takeout because I can't find our dishes, and Emma keeps asking when we're going home." But Emma wasn't the only one struggling with the transition. Jake, who had been excited about the move, began showing signs of homesickness that surprised everyone. Their old apartment had been small, but it was in a neighborhood where he knew every crack in the sidewalk and every friendly face at the corner store. Here, surrounded by unfamiliar streets and houses full of strangers, he seemed to shrink into himself. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when Jake quietly announced he didn't want Santa to come to the new house because Santa wouldn't know where they lived. Sarah felt her heart crack a little as she realized that in all their planning and excitement about the practical benefits of homeownership, they hadn't adequately prepared their children for the emotional reality of leaving everything familiar behind. Mark found a local heating contractor who could fix their furnace, but not until after the weekend. That meant 4 more days of creative warmth solutions, including family movie nights where everyone piled into the master bedroom with every blanket they could find. These impromptu slumber parties, born out of necessity, became the first new tradition in their new home. During those chilly evenings, something began to shift. Emma discovered that her voice created different echoes in each room, and spent hours singing to hear how the empty spaces changed her songs. Jake found that the acoustics made his guitar practice sound more professional, and he began teaching Emma simple songs. Sarah noticed that without the distractions of their old neighborhood's noise, the family was talking more, playing more, and discovering things about each other they'd never noticed before. The unpacking process revealed both treasures and challenges. Boxes labeled Christmas decorations were scattered throughout 3 different rooms, mixed with kitchen supplies and summer clothes in a confusion that made Sarah laugh and cry simultaneously. Some ornaments didn't survive the move, including the delicate glass angel that had topped their tree for 7 years. Jake found its broken remains and carefully gathered the pieces in a small box. "We can try to fix it," he told his mother solemnly, holding the box like it contained precious jewels. Sarah realized that Jake was trying to fix more than just an ornament. He was trying to fix the feeling that important things had been lost in the transition to their new life. She knelt down beside him, and together they examined the broken pieces, talking about how some things change when we move, and how that's both sad and exciting at the same time. Their first grocery shopping trip in the new neighborhood became an adventure in itself.
The nearest store was different from their old one, with unfamiliar brands and a layout that turned a simple milk and bread run into a treasure hunt. Emma treated each aisle like a new discovery, pointing out differences and similarities with the excitement of an explorer.
Jake remained skeptical until they reached the bakery section, where the aroma of fresh cookies was so appealing that even his resistance to change couldn't withstand it. The bakery clerk, an elderly woman named Mrs. Henderson, noticed Emma's wide-eyed fascination with the decorated sugar cookies shaped like snowmen and Christmas trees. When she learned the family had just moved to the neighborhood, she insisted on giving Emma a free cookie and welcomed them with the kind of genuine warmth that made Sarah realize they weren't just buying groceries, they were beginning to build connections in their new community. That evening, as they sat around their kitchen table eating dinner off paper plates because the regular dishes were still packed somewhere in the garage, Emma announced that she liked their new house because it had happy cookies nearby. Jake, with cookie crumbs still on his shirt, admitted that maybe the new neighborhood wasn't completely terrible. The heating contractor arrived on Friday morning, and within 2 hours their house was filled with the steady, reliable warmth they'd been craving. But more than the physical warmth, there was something else filling their new home. The shared experience of surviving their first week together, of problem-solving and adapting as a family unit, had created a sense of teamwork that felt different from their old routine. Mark took the day off work to help with the final stages of unpacking, and they made it a family project. Each person got to choose one room to focus on, with the understanding that everyone would help everyone else. Jake chose his bedroom, determined to make it feel like his own space. Emma, with typical 2-year-old logic, chose the bathroom because it had the best echoes for singing. As boxes disappeared and their belongings found new places in new rooms, the house began to feel less like a strange building they happened to be sleeping in, and more like a place that belonged to them. Emma's drawings appeared on the refrigerator, Jake's books claimed space on the living room shelves, and Sarah's collection of small plants found perfect spots on windowsills throughout the house. The transformation wasn't just physical. Jake started talking about our street and our neighbors, and he'd begun to notice details about their new environment that showed he was starting to feel ownership of his new world. Emma had claimed the bay window as her special spot for watching the world outside, and she'd created elaborate stories about the people and dogs she observed during her daily window time. By Sunday evening, as they sat in their living room surrounded by empty boxes and actually sitting on their own furniture for the first time in a week, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected. Yes, she missed certain things about their old life, but she was genuinely excited about the possibilities that lay ahead in their new home.
"So," Mark said, looking around at their progress, "are we ready to make this place look like Christmas?" Jake grinned, his earlier reservations apparently resolved. "Can we really put the tree in the bay window?"
Absolutely, Sarah replied, and for the first time since they'd received the house keys, she felt completely certain they were exactly where they needed to be.
Monday morning brought the kind of December weather that makes Christmas feel imminent and magical. Sarah woke to find frost decorating their new windows in patterns she'd never seen before, and Emma's excited squealing from the bay window announced that their neighborhood looked like a winter wonderland. The decision to purchase their Christmas tree became the day's primary mission, but first, they needed to solve the mystery of their missing tree stand. The tree stand had been carefully packed in a box labeled Christmas Essentials, but that box seemed to have vanished into the same mysterious dimension that was currently hiding Sarah's favorite coffee mug and Jake's homework folder. After an hour of searching through boxes in the garage, Mark discovered that their Christmas Essentials had somehow been packed inside a box labeled Master Bedroom Linens, which explained why their initial search had been so fruitless. Their expedition to the Christmas tree lot became a family adventure that highlighted just how different their new neighborhood was from their old one. The tree farm they'd always visited was now 45 minutes away, but Jake had done research and found a local lot just 10 minutes from their house. The new location was smaller but more charming, with hot chocolate stands and a petting zoo that immediately captured Emma's attention. The lot was run by the Morrison family, who'd been selling trees in the neighborhood for 15 years. Mrs. Morrison noticed Sarah's slight overwhelm as Jake and Emma ran in different directions, drawn by the combination of Christmas trees, farm animals, and hot chocolate. Without being asked, she stepped in to help guide their selection process, sharing which trees had the strongest branches for ornaments and which ones dropped fewer needles. "First Christmas in the new house?" Mrs. Morrison asked, and when Sarah nodded, she smiled knowingly. "It's always an adventure. We moved here 17 years ago, and I remember feeling like everything was different and nothing fit quite right. But you know what? Sometimes different turns out to be better once you give it a chance."
Jake found the perfect tree almost immediately, a 7-foot Fraser fir that was significantly larger than anything they'd ever been able to fit in their old apartment. Emma appointed herself the official tree inspector, solemnly examining needles and pronouncing each potential candidate pretty or very pretty. Mark and Sarah exchanged glances over the children's heads, both realizing that they were participating in their first new neighborhood tradition.
Getting the tree home and into their bay window proved to be more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The tree that had looked perfectly proportioned at the lot seemed to grow larger during the drive home, and maneuvering it through their front door required a level of coordination that tested everyone's patience. Mark discovered that their new doorway was slightly narrower than their old one. Jake learned that tree branches have a way of grabbing everything they pass, and Emma provided a running commentary on the entire process from her safe position on the living room couch. Once they finally got the tree positioned in the bay window, everyone stood back to admire their work. The tree looked magnificent framed by the large window, and Sarah realized that passers-by would be able to see their Christmas tree from the street, making their celebration part of the neighborhood's holiday landscape in a way that had never been possible in their old apartment. The ornament unpacking ceremony revealed both treasures and casualties from the move. Some family favorites had survived the journey perfectly, including the handprint ornaments Jake had made in kindergarten and the tiny mittens Sarah's mother had knitted for Emma's first Christmas. Others had suffered various degrees of damage, and the broken angel topper remained in its careful box of pieces, awaiting some kind of creative solution. Emma approached ornament placement with the seriousness of an art curator, insisting that each decoration needed to be positioned where it could see out the window and talk to the other ornaments. Her logic was impeccable from a 2-year-old perspective, and her enthusiasm was infectious. Jake initially wanted to place ornaments with mathematical precision, but Emma's creative approach gradually won him over, and soon he was helping her create what she called ornament neighborhoods on different branches. The broken angel topper situation sparked a family discussion about what to do. Jake's earlier desire to repair it had evolved into a more complex project.
Sarah suggested they could find a new angel, but Jake had become attached to the idea of fixing what was broken rather than replacing it. Mark proposed that they could create something new using the pieces of the old angel, which led to an afternoon craft project that became more meaningful than anyone had anticipated.
Using the unbroken wing pieces, some silver wire, and Emma's enthusiastic contribution of glitter, they created something that was part angel, part star, and completely unique. It wasn't what they'd planned, and it certainly wasn't traditional, but when they placed their creation on top of the tree, it looked perfect in their bay window against the backdrop of their new neighborhood. The tree decorating process took most of the afternoon, interrupted by hot chocolate breaks and Emma's insistence that they needed to sing Christmas songs to help the ornaments feel welcome in their new home. Jake initially resisted the singing requirement, but eventually contributed his guitar skills, turning their decorating session into an impromptu family concert that probably provided entertainment for their new neighbors as well. As evening approached, they realized they'd created something beautiful. Their tree, visible through the bay window, glowed with lights and memories, topped with their unique creation that told the story of transformation and resilience. Sarah found herself standing in their front yard, looking back at their house and seeing it through the eyes of someone passing by. The warm light spilling from their windows, the tree twinkling in the bay window, and the silhouettes of her family moving around inside made their house look like the kind of home she'd always dreamed of living in. The week that followed brought a series of small discoveries that helped the house feel more like home. Emma established a morning routine of checking the bird activity outside the bay window while eating breakfast, providing detailed reports on which birds were visiting and what they seemed to be discussing. Jake discovered that the acoustics in his new room were perfect for guitar practice, and he'd begun working on learning Christmas songs to surprise the family. Their new neighbors began introducing themselves in the organic way that happens in residential neighborhoods during the holiday season. The couple next door, David and Linda Chen, stopped by to welcome them and mentioned that the neighborhood had a tradition of Christmas Eve caroling that the Wales family was welcome to join. Across the street, the Patterson family had teenage daughters who offered to babysit Emma when needed, and Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store bakery turned out to live just 3 houses down the block. These connections felt different from their old neighborhood relationships. In their apartment complex, neighbors had been people who happened to live nearby. Here, there was a sense of shared investment in the community that made conversations feel more substantial and relationships more intentional. Sarah found herself settling into new routines that took advantage of their house's unique features. The dining room, which had seemed like an unnecessary luxury when they were apartment shopping, became the perfect space for Emma's art projects and Jake's homework. The backyard, still mostly empty and awaiting spring landscaping, became Emma's outdoor exploration territory and provided Jake with space to practice soccer moves without bothering neighbors. Mark discovered that his evening routine of checking locks and turning off lights took significantly longer in a house than it had in their apartment, but the process had become a peaceful way to end each day. Walking through rooms that belonged to them, adjusting thermostats and ensuring windows were secure, gave him a sense of responsibility and accomplishment that felt deeply satisfying. The approaching Christmas deadline added pleasant urgency to their settling-in process. Gift wrapping happened in the dining room, Christmas cookies were baked in their full-size kitchen, and holiday cards were addressed at the kitchen table while Emma helped by adding her own artistic contributions to the envelopes. One evening, while Jake was practicing guitar in the living room and Emma was having an elaborate conversation with her dolls in the bay window, Sarah and Mark found themselves in the kitchen talking about how different this Christmas felt from any they'd experienced before. Not just because of the new location, but because of how the process of creating home together had brought their family closer.
In unexpected ways, and
Remember how worried we were about moving during the holidays? Sarah asked, watching Jake teach Emma a simple chord progression on his guitar. Mark nodded, smiling at Emma's determined attempts to make music with fingers too small for guitar strings.
I think we were worried about the wrong things. We thought we'd lose Christmas magic by changing locations, but we actually created our own version of it.
As December 20th arrived, their house finally felt completely settled, not because every box was unpacked or every room was perfectly arranged, but because the space had filled with their family's rhythms, traditions, and daily life. The Wales family was ready for their first Christmas in their new home, and more importantly, they were excited to see what new traditions and memories this Christmas would create. Christmas Eve morning arrived with the kind of snow that makes everything look like a greeting card, and Emma's shriek of delight from the bay window woke the entire household earlier than anyone had planned. She'd never seen snow falling in their own backyard before, and the novelty of watching it accumulate on surfaces that belonged to them felt magical in a way that surprised even Sarah. Jake appeared in the living room wearing his pajamas and a serious expression, carrying a wrapped package that he'd apparently been hiding in his bedroom. "I made something for the house," he announced with the formality of someone making an important presentation. "It's for all of us, but especially for Emma because she's been worried about Santa finding us." The gift was a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "The Wales Family," with their new address carefully lettered below in Jake's improving cursive handwriting. He'd been working on it during his after-school time, using art supplies he'd bought with his allowance money, and getting help from his art teacher to make sure the letters were straight and the paint wouldn't run in bad weather. "I thought we could put it by the front door," Jake explained, "so everyone knows this is where we live now, including Santa." Emma's response was immediate and enthusiastic, but it was Sarah's reaction that surprised everyone. She found herself crying, not the sad tears that had characterized some of their difficult moving moments, but the overwhelmed tears that come when you realize your 8-year-old has been quietly solving problems you didn't even know existed. The sign installation became a family ceremony, complete with Mark's drill, Emma's supervisory input, and Jake's careful measurement to ensure everything was perfectly positioned. When they stood back to admire their work, the simple wooden sign made their house look unmistakably like home in a way that no amount of interior decorating had achieved. The neighborhood caroling tradition that the Chens had mentioned turned out to be a delightful surprise that perfectly matched their family's current situation. Rather than a formal organized event, it was a loose gathering of neighbors who enjoyed singing together and visiting briefly at each house. Jake brought his guitar, Emma wore her favorite red dress and insisted on carrying a small battery-powered lantern, and Sarah and Mark found themselves part of a community tradition they'd never experienced before. Moving from house to house through their snow-dusted neighborhood, singing familiar Christmas songs while getting to know the people who lived around them felt like something from a different era. Emma charmed everyone with her enthusiastic, if not entirely accurate, singing. Jake's guitar accompaniment added a professional touch to their informal choir, and Sarah and Mark discovered that their neighbors included teachers, retirees, young families, and longtime residents who remembered when their house had been home to 3 different families over the past 15 years. Mrs. Patterson, whose teenage daughters had offered babysitting services, shared that their house had previously belonged to the Williams family, who'd raised 2 children there before moving to Florida when they retired. The knowledge that other families had celebrated Christmas mornings in their living room and created memories in the same rooms where Emma now played gave their house a sense of history and continuity that felt comforting rather than strange. The caroling expedition ended at the Morrison family's house, where the Christmas tree lot owners had prepared hot chocolate and cookies for all the participants. Emma fell asleep in Sarah's arms during the final song, and Jake made friends with a neighbor boy who also played guitar and lived close enough that they could practice together once school resumed after the holidays.
Walking home through their quiet neighborhood, with Emma sleeping peacefully and Jake chattering excitedly about his new friend, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction about the community they'd chosen for their family. The evening had been spontaneous, welcoming, and exactly the kind of experience she'd hoped their children would have growing up in a real neighborhood.
Christmas Eve night brought the traditional challenge of getting excited children to sleep, but Emma's exhaustion from the day's adventures worked in their favor. Jake, now 9 and skeptical about Santa but unwilling to spoil the magic for his little sister, played along with bedtime rituals while making subtle suggestions about where presents should be placed for optimal Christmas morning impact. Sarah and Mark spent the evening assembling Emma's new bicycle in the garage, wrapping final gifts at the dining room table, and marveling at how different this Christmas Eve felt from all the ones that had preceded it.
In their old apartment, present preparation had happened in their bedroom with the door locked, hoping the children wouldn't wake up and discover the process. Here they could spread out, take their time, and even play Christmas music without worrying about disturbing neighbors through thin walls.
The bicycle assembly proved more challenging than the instructions had suggested, and by midnight Mark was questioning both his mechanical abilities and the wisdom of purchasing anything that required more than basic screwdriver work. Sarah's role gradually shifted from assistant to entertainment director, providing encouragement and hot chocolate while Mark worked through his frustrations with various bolts and brake cables.
Next year, we're buying the pre-assembled version, Mark declared at 1:30 a.m., finally tightening the last bolt on what appeared to be a functional bicycle. Next year, we'll know better about a lot of things, Sarah replied, looking around their garage filled with moving boxes they still hadn't needed to unpack, garden tools they'd inherited from the previous owners, and the various equipment that comes with home ownership.
But I think we figured out the important stuff pretty well. Christmas morning exceeded everyone's expectations in ways they hadn't anticipated.
Emma's discovery of presents under their tree in their bay window was accompanied by the realization that she could see other Christmas trees twinkling in other windows throughout their neighborhood. The sense of being part of a larger community celebration added magic to their personal family traditions.
Jake's surprise came not just from his gifts but from Emma's reaction to the bicycle. Her joy was so pure and enthusiastic that it reminded him why Christmas morning excitement is contagious regardless of age. He spent the morning teaching her how to balance and steer in their living room, creating a memory that would probably be retold for years. The day included phone calls to grandparents who wanted detailed descriptions of the new house, a Christmas dinner that Sarah cooked in her full-sized kitchen with proper counter space, and the discovery that their dining room was perfectly sized for extended family gatherings when Sarah's sister and her family stopped by for dessert. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came in the late afternoon, when the family was relaxing in their living room surrounded by wrapping paper and new toys. Emma was coloring in a new book in the bay window. Jake was reading a novel he'd received that morning. Mark was dozing in his chair after dinner, and Sarah was simply sitting and absorbing the scene. The house felt completely theirs in a way that went beyond ownership papers or mortgage payments. It felt like the place where their family belonged, where their children would grow up, and where their most important memories would be created. The transition from apartment dwellers to homeowners was complete, not because they'd finished unpacking, but because they'd successfully created a life that fit their new space. When evening came and the children were finally settled in their beds, Sarah and Mark stood in their living room looking at their tree in the bay window.
The lights reflected in the glass made it seem like they had two trees, one inside and one floating in the winter darkness outside. "So how was our first Christmas in the new house?" Mark asked, putting his arm around Sarah's shoulders.
Sarah considered the question seriously. The day hadn't been perfect in the magazine photo sense. Emma had spilled cranberry juice on her dress. The bicycle assembly had left Mark with several small cuts on his hands. And dinner had been slightly burned because Sarah was still learning her new oven's personality.
But it had been perfect in all the ways that actually mattered. It was exactly what we needed, she replied.
Not what we planned, not what we expected, but exactly what we needed. Jake appeared in the doorway, wearing his pajamas and carrying his guitar. "I learned a song for us," he said somewhat shyly.
"It's about being home for Christmas, and I thought maybe we could sing it together." The song was simple and sweet, with lyrics about finding yourself exactly where you belong. Emma, who was supposed to be asleep, appeared halfway through and added her own harmonic contributions from the stairway. Mark provided percussion by gently tapping on the coffee table, and Sarah found herself harmonizing with words that seemed to perfectly capture their first Christmas in their new home. When the song ended, Emma announced that she wanted to live in this house forever, Jake said he was excited to have friends over once school started, and Mark and Sarah exchanged the kind of satisfied glance that passes between parents when they know they've made decisions that will benefit their children for years to come. Later that night, after the children were definitely asleep and the house was quiet, Sarah took one final walk through their home. Each room held evidence of the day's celebrations and the past month's transformation. Emma's new dolls were arranged in a careful tea party in the living room. Jake's books had found places on shelves throughout the house, and every surface seemed to hold some small sign that this space belonged to their family. Standing in the bay window where their Christmas tree still twinkled, Sarah looked out at their neighborhood and realized that they hadn't just bought a house, they'd joined a community, created new traditions, and given their children the gift of roots in a place where they could grow and flourish. Their first Christmas in the new house was ending, but Sarah knew it was also the beginning of many more holidays, celebrations, and ordinary days that would fill their home with the kind of memories that make a house into a family's forever place. The Wales family had found their way home, and Christmas had never felt more magical or more real.